Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Andrew Martinez, and I am a first year PhD student at the University of Pennsylvania, where I serve as a research associate for the Penn Center for Minority Serving Institutions. Before we begin, I thought I would take a few seconds to explain the HSI Pathways to the Professoriate program. This program is a $5.1 million grant initiative from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation that aims to prepare 90 undergraduate students attending Hispanic Serving Institutions to enter PhD programs in the humanities. The Center for Minority Serving Institutions is partnering with 3 HSIs and 5 MRIs, which are major research institutions, to support and develop 90 scholars to prepare, apply, and enter a PhD program in the humanities. The goal is to increase the amount of Latino and Latina professors working in the humanities in U.S. colleges and universities. I want to personally thank all the PhD students on the panel tonight for volunteering their time to answer questions about their individual journeys to their PhD programs. For tonight's webinar, we will have each PhD student introduce themselves, where they're from, what they currently study, and what motivated them to pursue a PhD, and at what institution they are currently studying in. We then have a list of prepared questions and left some time at the end to ask any questions that are submitted via the chat function of this webinar. So if you're a student interested in entering a PhD program or an HSI coordinator that has a question or two that you think the panel should address for your students, please feel free to type them into the chat function of the webinar, and I'll see them and hold them to the end of the conversation. Without further ado, I will let all the PhD panelists and the other representatives at the center who are on the call to introduce themselves. And we can start with Lucas. And I will, after you're finished introducing yourself, Lucas, I'll call on the other panelists that I can see that are on the call.
Okay.
So the introduction is, can you share a little bit about your background and what motivated you to pursue a PhD?
Sure. My name is Lucas. I'm a fourth-year PhD student at the University of Pennsylvania in comparative literature and literary theory. I'm from Brazil originally, and I'm working on race and spirituality in Brazil, but perhaps also the U.S. and other parts of Latin America. I'll see as I start my dissertation. What motivated me to pursue doctoral studies was really kind of a number of things, both a genuine interest in studying literature and culture, but also a kind of wit's end of, what was I going to do next, especially after I had already done a Master of Fine Arts and MFA in creative writing. And it was great because I got to work on my own writing. It was fully funded, and I enjoyed school. But at the same time, it's not a very marketable degree. So I wanted to stay in school. I wanted to keep working on studying literature and culture, thinking about ideas, in an engaged way, but also perhaps in a more critical way. And comparative literature ended up being a great department for me because of how interdisciplinary it is, how flexible it is, and how much it allowed me to sort of move around different disciplines. So I'm actually quite happy with that choice. So yeah, that's how I ended up here.
All right, thank you. Christopher?
Hi, my name is Christopher Castillo. I'm a second-year PhD student in art history at the University of Pennsylvania. My interest. Sorry, I have a cold. My interests are ancient Roman art and architecture, with a particular focus on ethnicity and the image of the sub-Saharan African in ancient Roman art. I got into a PhD. One, because I love my field, and two, because I saw a distinct lack of individuals who look like me in all of my classes as I studied classics and art history going along. And part of why I'm in a PhD program and part of why I'm hoping to have a career in academia is to hopefully inspire an individual who looks like me and who's from a background as I am, I'm Mexican American, in the future.
Thank you. Aaron?
Hi, everyone. I'm Aaron Aron Aguilar, for those of you who speak Spanish. Aaron, for those of you who prefer English. And I'm originally from Mexico. I lived in Los Angeles for a while. I also lived in Arizona for a little bit. So I'm kind of a U.S. Southwest guy myself. And for those of you who are listening in from CSUN, special shout out to you. You're all in my hood. So, hi to everyone there. And currently I'm in Northwestern in Chicago, Northwestern University. I'm a fifth year PhD student in Spanish and Portuguese. And my area of research are migration narratives and border crossing narratives that bring Latinos together. So my research is really all about reading stories where Latinos cross into each other, right? Encounter one another. And so my research is looking at the kind of effective relations that border and migrant narratives produce among different Latino communities in the United States. And that's a little bit of my research. The reason I got into academia and really the reason I'm in this PhD program is because I didn't really see myself anywhere else. When I was in college, I knew that I wanted to be in the classroom. I knew that I wanted to teach, and I knew that I wanted to teach in the college setting. And so that was pretty clear to me, even as a college student. So it was really just a matter of figuring out how to make it happen, figuring out how to get myself into a PhD program, figuring out whether a PhD program was right for me, whether a master's was right for me. And so for a number of different reasons, I decided to do the PhD track and really kind of just worked to make that happen. And well, now I'm here. So, yeah.
Thanks for sharing. Brenda? Oh, your microphone is still muted.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. It's just there's some traffic in this hallway. So, Rosado, hi everybody. And I am a fourth year grad student at the University of California, Berkeley. Background wise, I was born and raised in Texas, but I also lived in Mexico and studied in Mexico for many years. My program right now is Romance, Languages, and Literatures, and my home department is Italian Studies, but that's my emphasis, and also do some Spanish literature, Portuguese, French, Latin stuff. And yeah, this is an important year because it's the year of my exams, written and oral exams, and after those are passed, hopefully, when I pass them, I will start dissertation. Why am I doing a PhD? I guess reason number one, I didn't have any pressure to do a PhD. Being a girl, Hispanic, so I was just curious what a PhD was supposed to be like, and I also knew that my reading skills and analytical muscles were not up there because before I actually went into humanities, I did chemistry and I worked in the field, so it's not like we had to really write well and express ourselves well. So I changed that because I fell in love with art history. So it all started with a course in art history. And I don't know if I'm missing anything so far. That's what I have to say.
No. Thank you for sharing. Now I see one of our panelists, Carlos Martinez Gano, is logged in, but I can't see or hear him, but I'm going to give him an opportunity to introduce himself if he actually can. So I'll just give a second to see.
Can you hear me okay, Andrews?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, my camera's a little not working. So my name's Carlos Martinez Cano. I am an advanced PhD candidate at the University of Pennsylvania's Graduate School of Education, and my focus is in anthropology and education. So I can tell you what got me interested in a PhD program was I had been a classroom teacher in Texas. I'm originally from the U.S.-Mexico border area, and I was teaching bilingual grade school and high school, and a combination of seeing the projected demographics, right, of U.S. Latino population growth or U.S. Hispanic population growth over the next 50 years, and also the work that I was doing as a high school teacher at the time. I was seeing some things in the classroom that I was really interested in, but I didn't know how to capture them for research purposes. So I did some investigating and found a professor there at Penn who was doing stuff in ethnography, essentially, and I applied, and to be totally honest, it was also because my GRE scores were about to expire, and I wasn't going to take that test again. So that was a big motivator for getting those PhD applications out.
Thank you for sharing. And then I want to give an opportunity for Andres and Mary Beth to introduce themselves, as they are part of the center doing this great work.
Hi, everyone. My name is Andres Castro Samayoa. I have the joy of also being part of the Center for Minority Serving Institutions as the Assistant Director for Assessment, and I'm involved with the HSI Pathways Initiative. I'm also a doc student in the Higher Education Division.
Thank you.
Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Oh, hi, everyone. I'm Mary Beth Gassman. I'm a professor here at the University of Pennsylvania, and I also serve as the director of the Penn Center for Minority Serving Institutions. Andres is my PhD student, as is Andrew. So, we are just really, really thrilled to have everyone participating. Thanks to the panel, especially those who I think are back from last time. And thank you to all the participants. This is just one of our signature programs, and we're really proud of it. And we're really, really excited to be working with all of you. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. So I'd like to remind the participants who are not on the call but are just interested in hearing the wisdom that will be discussed, that if they have any specific questions, to use the chat function of the webinar, and I'll save it for the last half of the call. But moving forward, the questions, we will not go in a specific order. So if you're on the panel and you're ready to answer, just go right ahead, and I'll keep us moving on throughout the call. So the first question is, what has your experience been like in graduate school? Can you touch on any transitions you have been through and how you overcame them? For example, how did you deal with moving to a new city, being away from home, and finding things to do outside of your graduate program?
In order. Anybody can start answering?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'll go. So there were two things, mostly in the academia side of it. When it comes to moving to a new city, because I had to transfer from Houston, that was not a big issue for me because I'm used to moving a lot. So I knew what my hobbies were, so I just had to get on finding the people that play beach volleyball or volleyball, any type of sports that I like. So that was easy. That was very nice to actually find right away, and now have separate groups of friends, right, colleagues and friends that are just sports wise. So academia wise, challenging. That was challenging for me because my undergrad, I was still in transition from the science, chemistry to humanities. So I felt like I was so proud of myself that I was writing and, analyzing these texts. But once I came here, it's like, oh my God, I'm not really at the level of these other colleagues who are coming from NYU and Brown and Harvard. And like, wow, I'm still in a transition period. But that's the only way I think I've been able to, get better, because I can see the difference, and that really made me work harder. So that's what I have to say about that.
Thank you.
I don't know if questions regarding that part.
Does another panelist want to join in?
I can say really quickly that one of the big differences about moving across the country for me, because there's two things happening, right? You're moving into this very intense type of intellectual work, and then you're also in a new setting. And so one of the things about Philadelphia that I really liked specifically was that I could find things away from, the textbooks and the reading and the writing that still fed intellectually or creatively into those endeavors, right? So for me personally, it was like gardening and, biking or cycling around town, or, running different types of like interest groups around town. And that helped me, everything kind of feeds into the project, right? So I was doing an urban studies graduate certificate at the time, and I ended up doing it on urban farms and community gardens. And so that was a way to develop my ethnographic skills while still, doing something, a little bit away from education that I still really enjoyed. So the idea is that that it kind of all feeds back into your main project or your big work.
Thank you.
I would mention a number of different transitions that I think can take place between your undergraduate career and graduate school, and I mentioned that earlier a little bit, right? Which is the kind of track that you're going to take, right? So there is a difference between going into a master's program and going into a PhD program. And in the humanities, of course, that's a big challenge because a lot of master's programs are not well funded, and you don't get a lot of the kind of funding opportunities that you would get in a PhD program. But there is also a kind of a challenge academically, at least there was for me, right, between going from an undergraduate program straight into a PhD program. That transition, I think, is a little bit rough in some ways, and it was for me, because it was very difficult to kind of wrap my head around the kind of intellectual labor that goes into the PhD humanities work, what it means to do research. That's a difficult question for humanists to answer in some ways. And so for me that was a difficult question too. And so that transition is something to think about. And thinking about kind of where you are, not necessarily academically, but really kind of how you are personally, right, in making that kind of jump. So those are my 2 cents.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted also to speak to that kind of accommodation or adaptation, I think, of yourself as a person and as a thinker through moving through a PhD program, because I think it's very hard sometimes to stay focused on what you care about and what actually is important to you, and why, what actually drives your passion, what your passion is, whether it be, a political motivation or any other kind. I think it's maybe particularly the case if you're studying literature or art history, or these disciplines that tend to be a little bit more abstract sometimes in the way that people talk about the primary texts. So I think it's really important actually to have, as others were saying, some kind of connection outside of academia to kind of remind you of what you care about, what is it that is grounding you, because as kind of strange of a world that it can be sometimes, and sort of isolating as it is, I think there are still ways for you to sort of, inject and kind of transmit the world outside into the academic world. In other words, the significance of the things that you care about. I think there is a way to translate it. Often it's actually feels like a huge obstacle, to really like be yourself in this world. But I think if you can actually maintain that balance between the two, between academia and the life outside, it's much easier to make that happen.
Thank you. And then Christopher.
I second everything everybody said. No, yeah, I think it's really important to find that I think what Lucas just said was actually really, really moving for me, actually, and it kind of resonated very strongly with me in finding something that is outside of the world of academia, but is also still that can also still remind you of why you do what you do. And for me, that includes things like talking and making sure that I'm educating people about what I do that are outside of outside of specialists. So doing things like giving museum tours or maybe doing some tutoring on the side or that kind of thing, where I can see the tangible fruits of my labor in a way that are a little different than producing another paper. And I think that's it's really nice to sort of stay connected to the community as well.
Great. Thank you. So our next question is, were any of you involved with a program similar to HSI Pathways to the Professoriate that supported you with the PhD application process? And can you discuss how being involved in that program made a difference in your success? And if you weren't part of a program like that, can you speak about your experience and what the process was like without that additional support?
I can start since I was. Oh.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll start because I was in I was in a program. I was lucky enough to be a part of the Ronald E. McNair program, which is a program that supports underrepresented minorities and low-income individuals and first-generation students to pursue PhDs. It's particularly focused at the STEM fields normally, but I kind of weaseled my way in there as a humanities student. And it provided things like GRE prep, help with applications, or writing applications, as well as the all-important sort of financial aspects of applying for PhDs, because those application fees can pile up, and it's good to have someone who's there to kind of help you with that cost. It was also really important to have someone who was just kind of there, being like, "Oh yeah, of course you can do this, sure." Without it being any kind of problem, and being very, very supportive. And I've definitely kind of carried that with me. And I think that was one of the main reasons why I sort of made it to wherever that is.
Thank you.
So I did not get any help whatsoever. So I was actually teaching full time high school students. I was teaching Latin, all levels. So I was prepping every day. So that's why I put behind a little bit the idea of going to grad school, because I was so absorbed in this job that I liked. Because I really liked teaching. So once I settled and I missed taking classes. I knew I wanted to continue. So I thought, okay, University of Houston has masters in world cultures and literatures. Why not start there? Because I do know, like somebody already said, masters will help you in a PhD program. So that was the plan. But the first semester, I was exhausted, just working full time, finishing school, driving all the way to campus, the University of Houston. It was, oh my goodness, I just don't want to remember that. But it was very tough, and I didn't like the idea that I was not really giving 100% to my studies, because I had my full time, have to pay for my house and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So I, talking to my sister, it's always out of a conversation, talking to my sister, I was explaining to her the situation, and she said, well, why don't you just apply to an institution that actually provides you with fellowships and grants that you don't have to pay for? And I was like, really? There's such thing? I had no idea. So that's when I decided to, it was the first semester only that I had started with 2 classes, this master program, 2 seminars. And I used those papers that I was writing. That was the most recent things written, right, by me after 5 years. So I was like, okay, well, I'm better do a good job in these papers and start application process. But it was a nightmare. So, but yeah, I think it was very fortunate for me that I was, accepted without a master's. But I wish I had known better. Or if I had more, don't worry, resources at the University of California. Maybe there were, but I just didn't have the time to look for them. Maybe there were. I still don't know. So that's how I did my transition from teaching full time to PhD.
Thank you.
I can go next. I did not have a program like this to help me either. And I don't know, honestly, if I was equipped to do it out of undergrad. I wasn't thinking about a PhD quite yet. So my MFA, since it was fully funded, and I actually didn't even have help to get into that. I was only looking through those message boards that are really sort of useful, but also not. Getting into an MFA program. But yeah, then luckily it was really only because I was meeting students who are already PhD candidates at the university where I was, the University of Minnesota, and just becoming friends with them and kind of getting their advice in the time I was there about what I should apply to. Also being able to take extra courses and talking to professors that I was guided towards what I'm doing now. But I think the sort of moment when I really realized how you would need other people is actually working on the material, working on the statement of purpose, particularly, which is so much about just like this kind of mechanistic know-how in some ways, and is really about like your access to those tools. And unfortunately, the access to those tools is very, it's not everybody has that access. I didn't have it. It's very much about a certain kind of really privilege that people have or don't have in terms of how they learn to navigate resources and use resources and really express themselves confidently. I think that's really something to stress here, is like often it's kind of just a showing that you can do something and you can do it, but it's like you have to convince people, and not everybody has been lucky enough to be put in that position where they feel like they can convince somebody. So that was definitely my where I needed to be pushed. And it was really with the help of a friend of mine who was already a PhD student, and he kind of just like proofread my statement and was really kind of harsh with it. But it needed that. It needed these sort of changes, and it needed to be in a specific kind of almost a formula. And I think this is something that you just don't know when these universities tell you to write about your what you want to do. It's so kind of abstract, but they are actually looking for something very specific, and you do need help with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll share a little bit about that too. So I wasn't in a similar program, and one of the things that I did, and I was really fortunate, is I had a mentor in my undergrad, a professor of mine who actually helped me kind of proofread drafts, and she looked over many different versions of the documents. She explained to me that when you're drafting these applications and these materials, what is essentially what they are is they're genres of writing. So you need to be basically fluent in what those genres are to be able to, as Lucas mentioned, to be able to draft them well. And so that's kind of the kind of what you sort of need to know going in, and in order to get that knowledge, you need to have a resource. So whether that is a professor, right? If you have somebody who you can talk to about mentoring you through this process, that's really phenomenal. That's a great thing to do. But also, I mean, really, now there are so many resources online. I'm getting books about how to draft, job letters, and so it's the same process, right? It's a kind of a very specific genre of writing, and so it's really about getting to know the conventions of what you need to do, and to getting the help where it is necessary, but really to have somebody, like Lucas or like me, who can read your stuff and who can really tell you, well, this doesn't work, you need to change it, and going through many different drafts I think I went through like 7 different drafts of all my documents. So it really is a process, and you need to start early.
Thank you. And before we move on to the next question, I want to see if Carlos, if you have anything to add.
No. I would just say that I didn't have those forms of support at the time. I'm finding everybody's different experiences very interesting and helpful.
All right. Thank you. So the next question is, are there any things you wish you knew before starting your program that you would like to share?
Oh, I can contribute to that. So I'm actually at the beginning of my 9th year of doctoral work, and one conversation that I never had, just because, especially like as a first generation graduate student, I just didn't know that these programs vary in length, right? Like you can get in and out of a higher ed program in 4 or 5 years, you know. When I undertook ethnography, and specifically this kind of like anthropological long-term engagement where you live out in a community for anywhere from 3 to 5 years, and then you have to deal with the volume. All of my dissertation data ended up being about 900 pages of transcripts that I had to transcribe myself, and that in and of itself took right around 18 months. And so I wish I would have had the conversation with a few different people who had gone through this before, right? To say if this is the practice that you're looking to develop, you have to be aware that these practices take time, right? It's not just looking at some quantitative national education data set and running some numbers through Stata or what have you. So yeah, definitely the length of time is what I would have talked about.
Thank you.
Okay. I wish I would have known about this psychological anxiety you get being a PhD student, these very important institutions. I thought I was gonna be immune to it because I didn't have any pressure in my family to do a doctor's degree. But once you are in this environment, it's like contagious. So I became very anxious the first year, and I wish I had known there's counseling. I mean, here I know now there's help for you as a grad student, but not only in relation, not only connected to school and the classes and the stress about that. Also, when it comes to family, or anything about your private life. So I wish I had done that from the beginning. I think that would have made a difference for sure. So I think that's the most important that I can think of.
Thank you.
I can add something along, I guess, similar lines. Something that I'm still grappling with now is this knowing that you can always ask for help for the most part. That as a graduate student, you are still, especially early on, and throughout your career, sure, why not? You're still a student, right? You're still someone who is learning and is expected to be developing. You're not a finished product. And that your advisors and people in your department are 98% of the time going to be super willing to help you with any kind of problem you have, if you're willing to approach them, and that's something that's really good to remember.
Thank you.
I think that was one thing that I would have regretted it had it not happened for different reasons. In other words, like I'm in comparative literature, but it was because I wanted to study literature in Portuguese and in Spanish. But then it also ended up being useful because I ended up sort of backing away from literary studies in certain ways, and I was able to do that because in Comp Lit we only have to take one required course. So if I ended up in another program, I think that's actually what I would have regretted, is like, am I really stuck just reading literature, analyzing literature, and not other things? So I think that's something to think about, is being open to or anticipating, how you might want to change focus in different ways. And it's hard sometimes to anticipate because you don't know until you get to school and start taking classes and kind of like feeling dissatisfied in some way. I think it happens a lot in people's first semesters. But I think it's also really important to listen to that dissatisfaction if it happens, or even as you're sometimes, working on your statement or looking at different programs and you look at certain departments that you think might be best for you, but you know that you actually could find others that are more well suited. I think it's really important, particularly for fields that people don't know a lot about, like fresh out of undergrad. Like I didn't know what American Studies was. I didn't know, what Africana Studies was doing. So there's these really kind of little pockets, I think, in academia that you might identify with more than others, and that's not always obvious. But yeah, and I would say once you are in school, to be open also to taking classes in other departments and other universities if you can. Also, I think it's important to look for resources even outside of your institution, because at this point it's really easy to take classes in neighboring institutions, and I've taken advantage of that for sure. So to just know, I guess is what I'm trying to say in general, that your options don't necessarily have to be limited. I think if you should listen to when you're bored. I think it's really important, and to try to move past that. But maybe you can use your place and your kind of privilege once you are in a program to do that.
Thank you.
Well, I guess I'll just say this isn't, I guess, something that I wish I would have known, but I think it is something that students who are looking for PhD programs should know, and that is kind of the importance of looking at the institutions you're thinking of applying to, specifically looking at kind of the people who you might be working with, right? Because you need to make sure that those institutions have people whose interests match yours, right? Whose work looks like something that you might use as a model for yourself, and so really to start thinking about kind of that not so distant future when you have to start building a committee of folks, right, who will be in your dissertation committee. And so I think that's kind of a good thing to start thinking about, and maybe avoid the kind of just thinking about the institutions themselves, like, oh, this school looks great, oh, this school has a great name, oh, this school, and to start thinking more about the kind of people who you're going to surround yourself with, and to do your research on who's there, right, in those departments, and in departments close to your department, right, to your field, so that you can start thinking about the people who you're going to surround yourself with there.
Thank you. That's a good segue to the next question, which is what did you all do to find an advisor?
Oh, good.
You mean an
Okay, I think.
Oh,
sorry.
Oh, yep, we can see you now.
Yes.
Hey, all right, yeah, it's the laptop is just as old as my entrance into a PhD program, so there you go. Well, I'll tell you what happened in my case briefly is that as I was doing research, I mentioned that I was looking to learn ethnography. I knew that these demographic shifts were happening, and so as I started to research programs, I really just came across a lecture that one of the professors at Penn had given online, and it was on the Penn website, and I listened to the audio, and I thought this is exactly the problem that he's interested in is exactly the same thing I'm seeing, but he's just seen it in a slightly different context. So I wrote a letter to him, and that just started everything. So it was this kind of chance organic development that worked out really well.
Does anyone else want to share how they found their advisor, or what strategies they used to find an advisor at their institution?
Well, in my case, it's a small department, and so there's only one professor that does the periods that I want to study. And I mean, he's very renowned, so I'm very fortunate because I didn't have to really struggle looking for somebody. And he's been very helpful. He even signed his name. Oh, I'll be your advisor, and signed the paper. I'm like, okay, perfect. I didn't have to ask anything. That was great. But I want to talk about another type of advisor that doesn't have to do with what you study, but with maybe a special program for minorities. So I have somebody who is soundboard when it comes to anxieties and my papers. So I go to this person when I know there's something that I have to write and it's important to me, or if it's a fellowship application, and I know I can go to this person and I feel very supported in that way. So I have two different types of advisors. In other words, very fortunate about that.
Thank you. So, Mary Beth, I was wondering if you could share what you had shared during the last webinar on the role of the advisor. And I thought it was really helpful for students to hear, like, how the advisor should be supportive and not trying to cultivate another one of themselves.
Okay, I think my audio's on. So I feel really, really strongly about this. So I've been a faculty member for, I think I'm in my 16th year. Yeah, 16th year. And one of the things I've seen is I've seen faculty members who, I really see them kind of falling into two camps, and some people are, somewhere in the middle. I don't really believe that everything is in twos. So, but I see faculty who like to create these mini-me's, and so they really put a stronghold on your voice and your research. And for me, I would run as far as I can away from anybody like that. I think that it's, well, first of all, I think people like that lack integrity and are unethical. So and I especially feel that way when that's done to students of color. I mean, not that I don't feel that way overall, but I think that oftentimes students of color are, their voices are hampered, their voices are silenced, and they're expected to kind of conform to the ways of an advisor. So I would stay away from anyone like that. And you can tell that very easily during an interview. When you're being interviewed, you should be checking these people out as well. For me, I feel that it's incredibly important to guide students, but I think that I want students to do their own work, create their own path, be their own person. I like Andres is on this call, for example. Andrew, you're so new. I'm not going to use you as an example, but Andres is in his 5th year and 5th and final, and even though he'd like to stay forever, but with Andres, he and I disagree about things, every once in a while. Actually, sometimes we'll get into these really interesting discussions, and I respect him for disagreeing with me. I think that that's how he becomes his own scholar. He should not be agreeing with everything I say. I mean, if he's agreeing with everything I say, then I'm not doing my job. And part of that is that he needs to cultivate his own opinions. He needs to, we do research together, but he also needs his own line of research. And so I think it's really important that you look for someone who's going to respect you, support you, challenge you, but also make sure that you have your own voice and become, your own scholar. Rather than a replica of them. And I think I said last time, Andrew, that I had been talking. I can't remember if I said this, but I had been talking to a student about a month and a half ago, and the student said to me, I read my dissertation and I needed a translator because I didn't recognize any of it. Right? It wasn't me. My advisor had basically rewritten it to the point where it was in her voice and not my own voice. And that's really sad, because what you want is the voice of the student to come out. And of course, you want to make sure it's their best work, but you don't want to take away that voice. So that was one of the things that I talked about. I just feel really, really strongly that you look for an advisor that is going to kind of cultivate your voice and really let it shine.
Thank you. And then, Lucas, I think I saw you about to talk about finding an advisor when I asked Mary Beth, but I wasn't sure. So,
yeah, I can say something. I think it's important to think about needing different things from different people. I think it's really important to realize, it's not going to be one person. I think a lot of people go into the PhD program, their PhD program, really, putting all their eggs in one basket. And I think that's bad for multiple reasons. I don't think most advisors, most faculty want to think that that's what's happening for one. But I think it's also inevitable they will not satisfy all of your intellectual cravings, and pursuits, and nor neither intellectual nor I think personal, because I think sometimes you also can establish a personal connection. Hopefully you will cultivate a more personal relationship with faculty, and not everyone is going to have that to offer you. There's different sort of levels of intimacy you're going to have with professors. So and on top of that, I think there's also the question of disciplines, like I was saying earlier, of interests. You might want just different contributions in terms of subject matter and sort of theoretical approaches, et cetera. There's a million reasons why you want different people on board. And then, also it's just like people can disappoint you at different stages of your PhD program up until the dissertation. So when, it's just not happening, and your rapport with the professor is just kind of not working out, it doesn't mean, it shouldn't be the end of the world. And there's often reasons why you maybe don't want to work with that person. I think it's, like Mary Beth was saying, to listen to your own kind of impulses and really try to find someone who will attend to them.
Thank you.
Can I say one other thing?
Sure.
I often give talks about mentoring, and one of the things that I tell people is, and I just wanted to agree with Lucas that I always think of mentoring as having sort of like a board of directors or a board of mentors. And throughout my career, and these are still people who mentor me today. I'm 48, but they mentor me today, and I've had, I have found that having certain mentors, sometimes it has to do with race or gender. Other times it has to do with the demeanor of the person. Like maybe you need a really warm mentor, or sometimes you need someone who gives you that little kick in the butt that you need, that you can't bring out your excuses with. And so I've had a variety of different mentors. And then the other thing I do is, as I've grown as a scholar, I've added mentors. So Andres has heard me say this many times. I actually consider Andres to be a mentor to me because I've learned so much from him in our relationship. I've just learned so much from him. And I put his face up in a big presentation I gave recently as one of my mentors, and everyone was looking at me like, what? I was like, but I feel that way. And so one of the things is I've added mentors, right? As I've grown and as I've tried to enhance my skills, even maybe 4 years ago, I added a new mentor who has challenged me so much and is the reason why I had the confidence to start the Penn Center for Minority Serving Institutions, because I was sort of lacking confidence in myself, even though people would wonder how that could happen, because I'm a fairly confident person. But he kind of pushed me, pretty hard. And so I think that I really like, Lucas, what you said about there are different people for kind of the different parts of you, and you have to seek them out, and they're really important because not everyone can fulfill every need that you have. And so having mentors is incredibly important in a PhD process and way beyond. So through your job search, through your first faculty position, as you go up for tenure, because you're going to still feel like the imposter syndrome. And then even when I went up for full professor, and even today, I think it's really important. So it's good to get in the habit of cultivating those mentors.
Thank you. So this next question, you may have touched on it when I asked about what you wish you knew, but it may be something different. But the next question is basically, is there any advice you have that you didn't get to say during the webinar, or that wasn't addressed through the questions that you would like to share with our prospective applicants for this program? Okay. So we do. Oh, yep.
I'm sorry. I would just to try and be like a little bit more edifying or reassuring. I would say that that it's really fulfilling work. There are I guess there's lonely times. There's times when you feel like you're kind of like in solitary when you're doing writing or whatever. If you're not doing writing in a group or something. But I've found, I look back at the work that I was doing, 2 years ago or 4 years ago, and I can see that growth, right? And so, like from then till now, and so I would just say, like advice wise, is just if this is something you're interested in, have confidence in yourself and in your own ideas, right? And also to give yourself the time to develop into that kind of scholar you want to be, and maybe like like the way Mary Beth was saying, as far as having mentors, there's certainly, like, I guess, qualities that you see in those mentors that you want to emulate, and not that you want to be like a carbon copy of that person, but just to allow yourself to do the work on your own, and it just kind of happens in this really like nice kind of way that I didn't expect. Like when I first started, I thought it was simply about like the credential or the training, and it kind of changes you as a person, and I mean that in a good way. So.
Thank you.
I have some very, I think, pragmatically oriented advice, which is that for me and someone who was coming from literary studies, for me, job placement was really important to look at the different programs that I was interested in. And I was more interested, or I looked at it more after the acceptances rather than before, because I think I just tried to pick, whatever the programs that seemed more well known and recognized to begin with. But then moving through now that I'm in my fourth year, it's actually been very both startling and necessary, I think, to look at the sort of waves of job postings, and what people are looking for in terms of candidates, because your field is always changing. And one thing, this actually relates back to the advisor thing, is your advisors may not necessarily be thinking about the job market. In fact, they probably they may just not at all, because they don't really have to. Since they're already well positioned, and that's just, since it changes so fast, it's also hard to keep track of, I think. So I think you need to kind of be independent in that way if you're thinking about your livelihood and getting a job afterwards within academia. Some people might not stay in academia, but you need to be assertive, I think, about finding what departments out there are looking for, and kind of shaping as I think you start thinking about the dissertation, you start to shape yourself already for that. Hopefully not losing any kind of stakes, in your work. Of course, that's not, I think, the point. But again, going back to that part about the know-how and the kind of ways that I think, being minorities, we're not really trained to think this way. But this is actually how you kind of have to do what you have to do to survive. You have to market yourself a certain way. So that's going to be on you more than anybody else.
Thank you. Mary Beth, you had something to add?
Good. One thing that I wanted to say is I think sometimes faculty fail to tell their PhD students that being a faculty member really is a wonderful life. And Carlos, you alluded to this. I try to talk about all the good things as well as some of the difficult things, especially I think the politics are probably the hardest part. But by and large, I would not trade being a faculty member for almost anything. I mean, being paid to think is one of the most beautiful things that you could ever imagine. And I think having the freedom to think about what you want, having the freedom to because there is especially once you get to be a full professor, there's an incredible amount of freedom to really think about anything that you want, to make any of the connections that you want, to work with anyone you want. And, there's also this incredible flexibility. And I want to say this for those people who are on the call who might be thinking about having a family, right? I think for me, being a faculty member was a really wonderful way of being able to have balance and have a family. I have a very close relationship with my daughter. I even wrote a piece called Mother Professor, Professor Daughter about encouraging people to actually be okay with having children if they want to, because I think there are so many messages that tell you not to have children, especially women. So I think for me, it was a wonderful way to have the flexibility to have a wonderful relationship with my daughter. I think that there are things that we forget, like the ability to be able to travel for your work. This is really wonderful, especially as your career develops. You'll be able to, wrap in travel to your work. The colleagues that you have all over the country, to have these wonderful friends all over the country. It's really, really lovely. I mean, that's probably one of the things that I cherish the most. And then the thing that I think is the most rewarding are these relationships with your students. I mean, I wouldn't trade my relationships with my students for anything. I love them much more than I would say that my relationships with them are much, much deeper than with my faculty colleagues, because these are people that I work hand in hand with. I cherish them. I cherish their commitments, and watching them develop as scholars is really, really wonderful and exciting in all these different ways, and they all develop differently. So I think I would be remiss in not saying that those are the wonderful things about being a faculty member, is teaching and opening eyes and doing research and being paid to think, and just having this community of scholars that is incredibly empowering. So I would want to make sure that everyone knows that this is a rewarding career. It's a really rewarding career, and I love every minute of it. And Andres and Andrew, and I don't know if Lola's on here as well, but they will tell you that, I mean, I wake up every day just ready to go, right? Ready to go, because it's really exciting. So, and I try to model that, because Andres is on the job market right now, so I try to model that every day.
Thank you for
add
that.
something?
Yeah.
Sure.
Sure.
Something.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think we haven't talked about teaching while being a grad student. I don't know if the program path would actually, keep students or the participants away from that or not. But that's part also of our duties. My funding is through teaching. The first year I didn't have to teach, but the second year and till now I've been teaching. But I've also been fortunate to receive some fellowships that have taken me away to Italy, to Venice, just last spring semester. So I know there's extra funding if you don't, you want to go away and do your research. And next semester, which is very important semester for me because of exams, I also was able to receive a fellowship. So I don't know if that's something that students would like to know more about teaching. As a way, the way your program is funded can be through teaching as well, right? I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Thank you.
I'll say something about teaching, actually. So now that we're talking about the really kind of the positive things, the great things about doing what we're doing is, for me, is teaching, right? So as I said kind of in the beginning, right, I came into the PhD program knowing that I wanted to teach, and teaching is one of the greatest satisfactions for me. So when I do have the opportunity to teach, either as a teaching assistant or teaching my own courses, that to me just gives me a lot of life. So, and it kind of re-energizes me in terms of the dissertation work, which for me is a little bit more difficult because I'm in it for the teaching, so that part really helps give me energy, and it kind of like keeps me centered and keeps me focused. And so all of those experiences teaching, I think, are really wonderful. So if you like teaching and you hear a lot of kind of those stories of students kind of complaining about the teaching component, which happens in grad school, you'll hear a lot of that. Don't listen to them, because you'll love it. And if you like teaching, you'll like it, and you're gonna enjoy it, and you're gonna really learn a lot from those experiences.
All right. Thank you for sharing. So that concludes our webinar tonight. again, thank you to the panelists for your words of wisdom. I'm sure that the HSI coordinators and our prospective applicants will really appreciate the time that you took out during this webinar and for the few of you who were in our previous webinar. So thank you so much. You should have already received an email from Lola. She's always on top of things. We want to send you some swag for supporting the center. So please reply to that email. And for the participants listening in to the call, the webinar has been recorded and it should be sent to the HSI coordinators by tomorrow morning and posted on the Center for Minority Serving Institutions YouTube channel. So good night and good luck, and feel free to contact the center if you have any questions about the HSI pathways to the Professoriate program. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.